Some, as many as 35%, have said that the pandemic has provided some cosmic, providential lesson, either in secularly spiritual or religious connotations. But in his letter to the church at Corinth, the former persecutor of Christians, named Saul, wrote, "Therefore judge nothing before the time until the Lord come, who both will bring to light the hidden things of darkness and will make manifest the counsels of the heart. And then shall every man have praise of God." And on April 6th, we posed a question to Ralph Northam, governor of Virginia, the nation's only physician serving as a state governor, specifically requesting any and all documents relating to any due diligence efforts to confirm or invalidate the potential contingency of a biological agent being deployed as a weapon of terror to avert the doctrinal surreptitious deployment by adversaries. And the reply was, VDH does not have any documents that are responsive to your request. Significantly, this reply is indicative that the nation's only physician serving as a state governor either never read either the largest sample size tracer context study before the lockdowns, an examination of almost 56,000 laboratory confirmed cases in China that found secondary infections in less than 5% of the tracer context, nor read nor considered the largest sample size tracer context study performed to date, examining over 3 million laboratory confirmed cases and finding only 4.6% in secondary infections. Or that he is unaware that a less than 5% infectious pathogen has absolutely zero pandemic potential and can only be deployed. That he had ignored the conclusions of the largest sample size tracer context study before the lockdowns that had specifically stated that it is not clear whether this correlates with the presence of an infectious virus. And despite having much touted experience as an army surgeon, he has no idea that any pathogen, regardless of infectiousness level, has the potential for being weaponized and deployed as a weapon of terror, and made absolutely no provisions or considerations therefore. And in the Synoptic Gospels of the Greek physician Luke, it is written that, "For nothing is secret that shall not be made manifest, neither anything hid that shall not be known and come abroad." Yet on the same day, just as in the Garden of Eden, when both Adam and Eve were ashamed of their nakedness, prompting an ubiquitous and omniscient God to inquire as to why they were hiding, Mark Herring, the state attorney general, decided to file a motion to dismiss that action in which he, the governor, had been evading the sheriff for the city of Alexandria since April 2nd, 2020, which has now been continued upon appeal to the Virginia Supreme Court. Moving on. Hello, my name is Major Mike Webb, and I am the son of a preacher man. And if you can't tell by now, I was exposed to an infectious dose of old-time religion as a child, and maybe suffering from long faith affliction, for which apparently there is no vaccine nor cure. But rather than reviewing the basic biology and pathology underlying the recent admission by the Virginia Department of Health for the next few minutes, we shall attempt rather to discuss some of the factors preceding an unprecedented pandemic that has physically changed all aspects of the American way of life, if only to provide a better understanding that made some actions in this inevitable. And for this instructional briefing, we shall be relying primarily on the data collection from the Pew Research Center, as well as a book that I studied in an introductory course on politics at the most competitive college in the Commonwealth, a book that should be familiar to at least some scholars in the social sciences, a work published in 1973 after a wave of worldwide independence movements and social unrest, much like we see today. Ted Robert Gurr's Why Men Rebelled. Gurr primarily addressed a concept described as relative deprivation, or what is abbreviated often as RD, but we shall be relying upon one of the premises for that theory, and one which even finds illustration in the Declaration of Independence, if you listen closely and critically, where the founder and Virginian Thomas Jefferson wrote in words familiar that we hold these truths to be self-evident. that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. However, the succeeding phrase may not be as familiar for many, and many may not be able to recite from rote this very important premise for the foundation of that government of the people, by the people, and for the people that President Abraham Lincoln, a Civil War time president, had hoped would long endure. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. And this operating principle is described by Gurr and many others in political theory as what has been termed as legitimacy. No government, no organization can exist without it. It must always maintain some level of legitimacy in the eyes of the people that are governed. And at least in the open source, according to the surveys performed by the Pew Research Center in July 2019, just 1 month before the State Department had issued a report citing serious concerns about the Beijing government, especially with regard to its capabilities in both cyber and biological warfare, things that may be irrelevant currently. They found that 75% of Americans believe that trust in government had been shrinking, compared with only 22% just 20 years before. And from a perspective of legitimacy, this is alarming. Moreover, at that same time, 66% of Americans felt the same way about each other, with the main concern expressed regarding interpersonal mistrust being that others could not be relied upon, with persons expressing the most distrust in minority population cohorts. Now imagine how social distancing, staying at home, separating and going into our own information silos might not be conducive to eroding that distrust. This occurred at a time when at least 63% agreed that the legacy of American chattel slavery continues to have an adverse effect on the descendants of former slaves, but also coming on the heels of the end of the Obama administration, when surveys indicated that racial tensions were at their highest points, even before the Trump administration, but where oddly the persons who most felt there was increasing racial tensions were not African Americans, but Caucasians. For whatever reason, primarily progressives, who also openly expressed disappointment that Latinos had failed to get incited to anger enough to become a game changer in the 2016 election. A very, very strong political motive. But the 2016 election also marks what approaches a paradigmatic shift for emotionalism being the primary driver of partisan American politics, all set on our city atop a hill for the world's eyes to be upon us. For as one might expect from the more religious and less educated by credentials conservative voters, were the leaders in being fixated upon feelings and not focused upon the facts. Just the year before, the contentious election fight between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump found progressive Democrats, at least for the first time in recent history, actually surpassing conservatives in reliance not upon rationality, but upon emotion, of the type that had been announced by Oprah Winfrey during the 2008 election of Barack Obama, when she said it was not about politics, but personal. And the ire of progressives and the press was echoed the world around, finding even nations abroad beginning to echo the loudest voices that they had heard in the press, which, as you might imagine, has a degrading effect on American influence abroad. Ripples. And in any power relationship, a void cannot remain empty, providing opportunities for other foreign powers to fill that vacated space. This is just basic politics. In the next segment, we shall examine these destabilizing aspects around the arising from Gurr's model of legitimacy on the American political scene that were in the open source for potential adversaries to exploit or influence in the context of the broader world. This briefing was unclassified. My name is Major Mike Webb, and by God, I am running for Arlington's Public School Board. Let's keep Mike Webb away from our schools. Honest. This advertisement was authorized by Mike Webb.
That years